design for, if I put that up, that design there. So we're going to continue just putting these things in into here. So I'm going to power all these things up. I can do that because I've got plenty of RAM in that, and you can too. What we'll do is then I'll turn off like the second router and the Windows 10 machine, and then start putting in the servers, because just having the 3 routers here is only less than 500 megabytes. So let's start them all up to begin with. They never go as fast as I want. So there's my internet router. Branch office 1 router. Branch office 2 router. And the old Windows 10 for testing. So I minimise that down at the road for the moment. So now that I've got the internet up, I'm just going to test on the.
Hey, Martin.
Yeah, mate.
In the video, or in the diagram you provided, we have like DCs, but in the video you don't set that up. Are we just skipping that, or?
The domain controllers.
Yeah.
Yeah, this Active Directory. Yeah, I'll be doing that today.
Okay. All right.
Yep. So because at the moment is all we've done is these routers. We've done these 4 routers plus the workstation.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So today, the part of what today is to start installing the servers and domain controllers, but not going. We're not going to put too many services in. We're just going to build stuff, and we can build an awful lot of it. Like we can build all of them, but only power them up one at a time, sort of a thing. Because there's a couple of people with 8 gigabytes of RAM, so that's going to limit them. You have to make assumptions that you can't put too many machines up at once. At the moment, I think what we've done in the virtualization is we've got 3 1.5 gigabyte servers up, and I think most people are able to run those 3 servers. So that's 4.5 gigabytes. Whether we can actually get to 5 gigabytes used by virtual machines, which is like 3 servers plus 3 routers, that would be fun to see, because then we've got 6 virtual machines running in 5 gigabytes of RAM. So we're going to see how that goes. So at the moment, I'm just going to go shell prompts in this. Needs to, where's the mouse? There it is. Shell prompts. Okay. Ping, let's ping out to the internet, 8.8.8.8. Okay, so my head office router is getting out to the internet. Control C, Control D. My branch office 1 should do the same. Shell prompts, ping 8.8.8.8. Gets out there as well, Control C, Control D. And if I go shell prompt on branch office 2 router, ping 8.8.8.8, and it gets out to the internet as well. So these 3 routers here go through this router to get out to the internet, which means NAT's turned on here. So we're just going to put the workstation behind each 3 of these and make sure it gets out as well. So I can minimize these 3 at the moment. Back to my Windows 10 machine. Go back to Yoda. Doesn't matter how fast our systems are, we're always waiting for a Microsoft operating system. It's just the way it is. Remind me in 3 days what? Continue. Browser, don't update browser. Skip for now. It's like it's doing a complete startup. Cancel that. I don't want Microsoft. Okay. Your default browser was reset. Bloody Microsoft. I want you to keep on with Edge all the time. So let's get rid of all of these notifications. Clear. Okay. Okay, so what we want is a CMD. Come on. And I want to pin it to the taskbar. I'll do. So I can just open it up at any time. Ping 8.8.8.8 gets out there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do it, just see where I'm actually located. Network settings. I'm currently plugged into the branch office 2 switch. So if I plug into the branch office 1 client switch, should get a new IP address. Yep, should have got an IP address now. Up arrow, I can get out. And IP config. Yep, I've got a 10.131, which is, I'm in the 10 subnet, that's in branch office 1. So I'll unplug it and place it into the head office. Place it into the head office clients. Go OK. It's down. It's got to get a new IP address. It's got it. So up arrow. Now I've got 0.131. And it gets out to the internet. Okay, so that tells me that the NAT setup on all of these is all okay as well, because I've plugged my workstation into the branch office 2 client, the branch office 1 client, and the head office client switches, and I'm able to get out to the internet just by pinging. You could actually trace route as well. Trace routes. If I go -D, so it doesn't do any DNS lookups, and go 8.8.8.8. It'll show you that I'm going through a lot of routers. So here I am, workstation here through the head office client switch. So I'm going through 0.129, which is this router here, the head office router, which is the first line. Then I'm going to 10.0.10.1, which is this router here. Then I'm going to my NBN router, 192.168.1.254, and then I'm out into the internet. So you can see these are all sub 1, they're 1 millisecond, and all of a sudden it goes to 27 milliseconds. So that the internet's like that, and my internal network's like that. Okay, until I eventually get to Google's DNS server. So that makes it all pretty good. So I know that that's all working. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut this thing down because we don't need it anymore. Shut down. And I'm also going to shut down the branch office 2 router. H, yes. So that just leaves the head office router, the internet router, and the branch office 1 router, the places where we're going to put servers. And so the tedious part of this now is going to be, importing appliances, and making our servers. So go to my OneDrive connection, pick up an OVA. I'm going to go to Server 2019. The other thing that I'd like everyone to do is to have at least one Server 2016 in the environment. Generally, our Server 2016 is our oldest server, which is generally the first server in our environment, which would be our head office domain controller 1. So we could put that as a Server 2016, and then 2019, the branch offices are coming on afterwards. WSUS, we want the latest version of server, so Server 2019. But what we might do, just for the sake of that, we've got to have a couple of different generations of server. What we'll do is we'll put Server 2016 as the web server. It's out of the road. It's not going to cause any problems. You know, run a web server, que sera. So we're going to pick 2019 for all our domain controllers. So let's do a domain controller. We're going to call this thing head office DC1. The RAM is going to be 1536. The image is going to be called head office domain controller 1.vdi, and I want it to be in the GWMP demo group. Okay, and we're going to generate new MAC addresses for all network cards, just to make sure. Okay, that'll do it. So there's a fair proportion of this lesson is just sitting here waiting for these things to import. Because you can't actually do anything while this thing's importing, I don't think. Can I do stuff while something's running? Okay, that's good. Yep, okay. So if there's a machine up and running, you can play with it while you're importing the next machine. That's handy to know. So I'm pretty sure these servers are supposed to have a, oh no, there you go, it's done. Put it up there. So I can power this on and do stuff to it, and then while it's up, I can import the next one. Yep. Okay. That way I can be doing something at the same time as I'm importing. So once it's up and running, I can file, import an appliance for the next one. Go and find OneDrive, VM resources, AVAs. Let's go head office domain controller 2. So it's going to be a 2K19 server. So let's call this Head office domain controller 2. Let's change that to 1536 for RAM and change the name of the disk image, head office dc2.vdi. And we need to make sure it's placed within the GWMP demo group. So let's go import. Oh no, we need to change the MAC addresses, generate new MAC addresses for all network cards, and go import. So while that's doing that, I can be working on the first domain controller. I think this one will be imported before the first domain controller is even up and running. Okay, let's get the graphics driver in. It's one of the things I want to change. I'm going to flip back out of the that screen tearing. That's the VirtualBox graphics driver, so I'll ditch that. I don't need the thing to look pretty, I just want it to run fast. Okay, English Australia next. Accept. Usual password. Finish. Okay. So I'll power up domain controller 2 while I start up the web server or import a web server. That one's going to be 2016. So I'll power that up. Okay, so that's running. So now I should be able to import the next one. Import. Down to my OneDrive. Resources, AVAs. This one's going to be a server 2016, sysprept. So I'm going to call this one head office www. Change that back to 1536 and change the name of this to head office www.vdi. And the primary group needs to be into the Get Well Medical demo, and we need to generate new MAC addresses for network cards. CPU is 4, let's change, well, it doesn't matter whether it's 4 or 2. It's only a web server, 2 will do. Okay, import. So while that's importing, I can go back to my head office 2 domain controller. So for people with 8 GB of RAM, this is getting to the point of, ooh, we're nearly full of RAM, of the RAM. Screen tearing, yep. So while that's starting up, back to 1, let's log in. And the thing I need to do with this is to make sure it's plugged into the right switch and give it the right IP address. That's the important thing. and then see if it can get out to the internet.
So yours boot up so quick. Mine just doesn't.
Oh, this thing here.
Yeah, like I've been waiting for mine to boot up.
Oh, I'm complaining about how slow it is. Funny. This thing's got an IP address from DHCP, I think. It thinks it's got an IP address. Okay, so I'm going to change all that. There's a guest editions update available because this is version 6.1.18 and we've got 6.1.26, which is, I think, if I have a look in here, the current version that I've got, yeah, 6.1.26. I haven't checked, you know, they change quite regularly. So we'll kill that. So while I'm working on this, I can have, I can be making another machine even if I don't have it running. So what I'll do is I'll put the branch office 1 server in as well. So over to here, file, import an appliance, back down to there, find the OneDrive, resources, OVAs, and on another server 2019, sysprept. And so this is branch office 1 server. Okay, I've picked the right one, so go next. Change the name to branch office 1 DC1. Change the amount of RAM to 1536. Change the name of the drive itself to match branch office 1 domain controller 1.vdi, and make sure that the group is set to the Get Well Medical Practice demo, and that the MAC addresses change, get new MAC addresses, import as a VDI. Yeah, that looks all okay. I might change that to 4. And do an import on that. Okay, so while that's still now, I can go back to my head office domain controller 1. So the importing and creating of the virtual machines in the back, that's just happening in the background while I'm playing around here. First of all, I need to make sure this is plugged into the right switch. So looking at my diagram, the head office 1 DC needs to be plugged into the head office server switch. So let's go to network settings. Of course, when you create any new virtual machine, it always goes to NAT. We want that to be internal, and I want to put this in the head office server switch. And it's still cable connected, that's good. Okay, let's go okay on that. So now we're plugged into the right thing. What I would do is go to local server and configure the network cards, and I'm going to change the name and all that sort of stuff as well. So one of the first things I do is I go to the Internet Enhanced Security configuration, turn that off. That way we can get to websites without having to tick boxes every single time. The firewall's on, remote management's enabled, remote desktop is disabled. I often put that on. Allow, so I can refresh and that should come on. Yep. IP4 address is going to be assigned as a static IP address. So I'm going to properties of the Ethernet card. I'm going to turn off the quality of service packet scheduler. The reason being is the quality of service packet scheduler reserves some of your network cards bandwidth. for higher priority items. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I want it all. I want all of the bandwidth. I don't want any of it reserved. So IP version 4 properties. I'm going to give it a static IP address. Let's have a look at our thing here. So our head office server is in the 192.168.0.0/26 subnet. So it's going to be 0. In this case, it's going to be 0.2 because 0.1 is the card that's on that's the gateway. Is 0.1 is the way out. So this is going to be 192.168.0.2, and the subnet mask is a /26, so that's going to have to end in a 192. And default gateway is 192.168.0.1. And the preferred DNS server. So on here, there's a couple of different ways we could do this. I could just go 8.8.8.8, which is Google's DNS server, and that'll work. Or I could go to my NBN router that's in my home network, which is 192.168.1.254, and that will pass out to my internet service provider's DNS server, which will then keep on going out. There's no point in pointing it back at myself as yet because I haven't promoted this to being a domain controller, and therefore I haven't. I don't have a DNS on this local machine as yet. I will do when I promote this thing to being a domain controller, in which case everything else will be pointed towards this machine, the 0.2 machine. But actually most of the servers are going to have their own DNS anyway, so we're going to have at least 3 DNS servers, maybe more. Okay, so preferred DNS server, I'm just going to go 8.8.8.8. No, I won't. I'll go 192.168.1.254. So that's the NBN router in my network. The alternative I could have would be 8.8.8.8. There we go. Goes out to the internet. Okay, so we've got a gateway, we've got an IP address, we've got the right subnet mask, we've got DNS servers, all that sort of stuff. And we're plugged into the right switch, which is the important thing. You can see it's found a network, which is fine. If we look at the actual network settings, we're plugged into the head office server switch. Okay, because we know, based on our workstation head office client, we could actually get out to the internet. One of the things we should check now is to make sure that this thing can get out to the internet as well. CMD, come on. Right mouse click and send to the taskbar. Ping 8.8.8.8. And it gets out to the internet, which is what we expected really. So that's all good. Okay, so we've got a static IP address, remote desktops, we've got that turned off. So what we really need to do now is to change the name, and then we'll worry about turning it into a domain controller. So let's change the name and call this thing HODC1. HODC1. Let's go OK. And it'll do a restart. So that machine's OK. I'll minimize it out of the road. It can go do what it's going to do. I'll get head office DC2. So while we're at it on head office DC2, let's look at its network. You can see it's currently on NAT. So let's put that to an internal network to the head office server switch. That's where that one needs to go. While we're at it, let's Whoops, let's go OK. Let's do the same thing for these other domain controllers we've got. So if I click on that one and click on the head office web, let's look at its network. It's an internal network, but it needs to be HODMZ. So head office DMZ. And the branch office 1 domain controller needs to be plugged into the branch office 1 server switch. So let's click on its network card and plug it into the right one. It's internal and branch office 1 server, that's correct. Okay, so we've got them all plugged into the right switch now, that's always a plus. This thing's up, it gets out to the internet, it's doing a restart. Let's work on domain controller 2. So that's next. We accept the license agreement. We type in the usual password. We finish. Give it a Control-Alt-Delete, type in the password. I'm pretty sure we got this thing plugged in the right switch. Yeah, we did. You can always check that, of course, by, yeah, we can see it's plugged into the head office server switch, yeah. Okay, this should bring up the so this is going to be a .3 address.
Hey Martin.
Hello.
Still booting.
You've got a virtual machine you've created and it's still booting?
Yeah, the Windows 10, the routers work fine.
Okay. So if you go down to the taskbar on your host machine and go to the task manager, just check how on the performance tab, just check how much memory you've got.
Got 16.
So how much free have you got?
It's 10 gigabytes.
10 gigabytes free?
In use, so 6 in free.
Sorry?
There's 10 gigabytes in use, so there's 6 gigabytes
free. Okay, so you got plenty free. Yep. Okay. So it's not a memory issue. Okay, so if it's not a memory issue and the thing's still trying to boot, it could be the way you've imported it, or the image that you've downloaded off the OneDrive is corrupt. What I would do is, while that thing it's still trying to boot, isn't it?
It looks frozen to me. Nothing's been
so you could give it a restart, try and import another one and see if the next one's any different. Because really, because one's stuffed, you don't know whether the image is buggered that you've downloaded. So I would
just moved a little bit, so it's incredibly slow.
Okay, so have you got this on an external drive, like the virtual machines?
Ooh. Yeah, I've got the virtual machines on my hard drive. That's a good point. I should put it on my SSD.
Yeah. The other thing is, if your ISO or your OVA file that you're building from is on the same drive as what you're installing to, then what you're doing is you're halving the bandwidth of that device because you're importing files out of the OVA and then you're writing them back to the same drive. So if you can, separating the drives is a good thing. So in my case, I've actually got all my OVAs are on a solid state drive, a 1 terabyte solid state drive, and where I'm building them is onto a different solid state drive. So that's why I'm getting the maximum that I can, considering I've only got a 2.1 gigahertz processor. So the processor itself is slow, but storage is reasonably fast. So that's why I'm getting decent speeds out of it.
So you have the.
Sorry, I can hardly hear you.
Sorry, I'm still working on the new mic. Should get one soon. No, it's all good. I should figure it out.
Yep. Okay. Look, doing all this stuff does take time. We'll probably spend the whole lesson just building this, the rest of this stuff on this network here, and then we'll spend, another lesson getting them all in the domain, and and then start putting services in and all that sort of stuff. Once we start, once we've got the VPN tunnels, for example, and we're getting across the network, because before we get our branch office 1 domain controller to join the domain, we're going to have to set up these VPN tunnels. Okay, because we want this thing to be like in a completely different subnet and all the rest of it, but still get to our DC1 to join the domain across the internet through a VPN tunnel, all that sort of stuff, because that's what happens in the real world. You have to do that. Building these things is okay. The whole guts of our system is going to be these 2 servers here. That's going to be the guts of our system. And then this thing here is just sitting on the side, not doing much. Only if we want to have a web server and want to be able to check that anybody coming in from. So if I put my workstation, because eventually I'm going to get this to join the domain. So it's going to be a domain-based workstation, but every now and then I'm going to log it into the local machine, maybe bridge it to this card up here, and I'll come in as Joe Public through the internet. And can I actually get to here? So the other way of doing it is, plugging, instead of bridging it to the outside here, is to, which represents somebody coming in from the outside. Do I actually plug them into, say, switch 1 here? So they're still outside the front firewall and they're coming in, so you can have them representing the outside, because at the moment I've got a NAT firewall here and another NAT firewall here. So coming in from the outside, I'd need to have port forwarding on here and port forwarding on here, which, that part there wouldn't be the case in the real world. We wouldn't have another NAT router there. We've got it here at the moment, just so we can have all of these machines modeled to get out to the network. So this sort of represents our internet service provider to some extent, and rather than the internet. But Joe Public, if he's even attached to switch 1, he's just coming in straight to there. That's quite fine. We still have to have port forwarding and stuff on there, because we're going to do the same. If we had a web server in here, we would do the same on, we'd plug it into switch 2 and test that we could access the web server in branch office 1 or branch office 2 if we had web servers in either of these, which, in this particular design, we're not considering. We just got one web server and it's in the head office. But, as this franchise goes Australia wide, 20 plus sites, it's guaranteed that one of the other states will have their own regional web server, whatever, that sort of thing. Who knows? Maybe we'll go international one day, get well medical practice, whatever. Okay, so okay, so building this is going to be fun, and getting these things to join the domain, it's going to rely on some of these other things working. So we'll get there. There'll be a couple of videos. hopefully after I've done it this once in class here like this, doing it again to do the video won't be so long. Okay, so this is head office 2. Let's go to the local server. Let's turn this stuff off. This is the first time I've been in here, obviously. Do a refresh. It's off. Remote desktop's going to be enabled. Refresh. Set the IP4 address. Properties. Disable quality of service. Go to IP version 4. Look at the properties. Make it static. This is going to be a 192.168.0.3 because that's the IP address we've got here, .3. And the subnet mask is got to be the /26 subnet mask, 192. And the default gateway is going to be the same default gateway here of 192.168.0.1. Preferred DNS server, this is going to be fun. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put this machine here as the preferred domain controller, and then the secondary domain controller will be just out to the internet. So this is going to be 192.168.0.2. And what that means is this machine will be able to find that DNS server once I've promoted to being a domain controller so that this machine can join the domain fairly easily. When we get to that stage, I'll actually delete this alternative DNS server. So I'm going to go 192.168.1.254. Okay, so put all the right settings in place. Found the network. So I'm going to put a CMD. And I'm going to send that to the, come on. Taskbar. Ping 8.8.8.8. Yep, gets out there, that's good. Controls. Can't see why it wouldn't, because I mean the first domain controller did so. Obviously the whole part of it's all okay. So that's all enabled, that's off. Let's rename this thing and let it do a reboot. So change, call this thing head office domain controller 2. I think that's what we're calling it, head office domain controller 2, yep. And we'll go okay. Restart your computer. Restart now. Okay, so minimize it out of the road. Okay, so that's 1 and 2. So I'm not using that much RAM yet. I can have one more server running before I technically run out of RAM if I'm running 8 gigabytes. So I'm going to power up the web server.
Press the button, you must.
I got rid of that one, whoever was ringing me. So what I'm going to do is I could turn off one of these servers while I power up the next server. This one here, I think we restarted it to see the name change and all that sort of stuff. So while this is up and running. Okay, so if I go to local server, you can see it comes up as HODC1 work group. It's got an Ethernet port, gets out to the internet, does everything. So what I'll do is I'll add roles and features, and I'll add the Active Directory type stuff in here. So next. Active Directory domain services, second from the top. Add all the features, hit next, install. So while that's doing that, I'll work on the next server. So let's go back to DC2, which is that one. That should have come up with its name now. Okay, so looking at the local server, HODC2, which is good. It's currently in a work group. It's got the right IP address, all that sort of stuff. So I'm just going to power this thing down while I'm fixing the next machine up. So this one's ready to go, ready to join the domain, which I haven't created yet. So shut down. So this is a operating system. Let's go plans, other plans, shut down. So that's going to shut down, and I'm going to work on, so this thing is doing an install. So I'm going to go to, that one's now ready to go once this thing becomes a domain controller. So I'll work on the web server now. Let's power that up. So you can see I've minimized the active machines that are running to keep the speed up for the machine I'm working on at the moment, or the one that's in the back running in the background, which is becoming a domain controller at the moment. So let's just move that out of the road a little bit. So this one's the web server. So once we get this to join the domain, same as the head office DC2, then this is going to be HOWWW. The reason why I changed it from just www to HOWWW is because we could, in theory, have another web server somewhere, one of these other branch offices. So there is one thing that I would like to, which I haven't done on all of these machines, but I should, and that is to switch the graphics driver back to the, update the, I should update the guest editions, and then switch the graphics driver back to being a just a standard Windows one. So I might do that before I turn the other thing into a domain controller. So this is a Server 2016, this machine. What's my domain controller doing? It still hasn't finished installing yet. Okay, so here's our Server 2016. We accept it. Oh, too many characters there. Better. So I'm now into this. There's really not a lot of difference between Server 2016 and Server 2019, is there? Looks very similar. Yeah, just tell me that I can update me guest editions, which we'll do after we've done an install of the latest version. So so this says that okay, let's turn off the internet enhanced security. Oh, it is off. It's already off. Let's enable the remote desktop. Let's do a refresh. It becomes enabled. Let's change the IP address. Properties. Turn off quality of service. Go to IP version 4 and look at the properties. It's going to be a static. So the IP address for the web server is going to be 192.168.0.66 with a gateway of .65. Okay. So this is 192.168.0.66. The subnet mask needs to be a /26, so it ends in a 192. Default gateway is 192.168.0.65. And the preferred DNS server is going to be our good old server over here, 192.168.0.2, with the alternative DNS server as 8.8.8.8, that'll do. Okay, found a new network, that's good. Got all these things in place, so let's just go, just check to make sure we can get out to the internet from here. So CMD. Right mouse click and send to the taskbar. Open it. Ping 8.8.8.8, and it gets out to the internet, which is what we expect. Exit. Okay, let's change the name of this thing. Change. Call this head office www. And go OK. And let it do a restart. Okay, so we're out to the internet on that, and ping-wise, and change the name, all that sort of stuff. So let's just see how we're going as far as Active Directory installation. So configuration required, installation has succeeded. So let's go close on that. So before I actually promote this thing to being a domain controller, I'm going to put in the latest extension pack. I'm going to quickly just go to my host machine and see whether on here, actually just go to virtualbox.org, virtualbox.org. Let's see if we've got come on, you can do it. Downloads. Yep, 6.1.26 is still the latest, so that's good. We don't need to change anything. So let's flick back to so here's my head office domain controller 1. So on the devices, I'm going to insert the guest edition CD. And this will allow me to update the inbuilt guest editions. So I'm going to run the VirtualBox guest editions. Next. Because puts in the new version of the graphics driver, obviously, and we want to take it back out. Okay, so that was the new graphics driver, just came in. That's why it went blank. I want to reboot manually because what I want to do is right mouse click and go to the device manager and change the graphics driver back. So display adapter, you'll see is the VirtualBox one. So I'm going to do a right mouse click and update the driver, browse the computer for driver software, let me pick from the available drivers, and I'm going to pick the Microsoft, because you can see here it's got 6.16, 6.1.18, 6.1.26. So it's got quite a few different versions of the VirtualBox graphics adapter driver in there. I want to go back to the Microsoft one. Okay. That causes a lot less problems, and it's just as fast actually. The VirtualBox driver is not that fast. Okay, so we've installed the latest drivers. We switched the driver back. We're ready to promote this thing to being a domain controller and then letting it do a reboot. So promote this server to being a domain controller. So while you're doing this, this is going to be a brand new domain controller in a new forest. And the root domain name is GWMP. So GWMP, and I'm just going to put my initials on the end, bmw.local. So so it's Forget Well Medical Practice, but it's my version of it. Next. We want to keep the forest and domain functional levels compatible with Server 2016 because we've got a Server 2016 as our web server. We want it to become a DNS server, so that's good. It goes a global catalog server by default because it's the first domain controller in the forest. So it needs to be a global catalog server. I type in the usual passwords. And hit next. It comes up with a warning, says DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone can't be found, which is okay, we don't care because we're going to make our own DNS server anyway. So we just go next. The net BIOS name is the old version of naming convention that's used only within a subnet. So within this subnet, it would recognize that GWMP BMW. I wouldn't have to put the .local on. Okay, the database locations, I'll just leave them at the default locations. That's a summary. Next. It does a prerequisites check. So it's just checking to make sure that everything's all okay. I'll get a couple of little warning triangles, but they're nothing to worry about. So here it says, allow cryptography algorithms compatible with NT4, which is really old. A delegation for the DNS server couldn't be found, which we already knew, but otherwise their prerequisites checks completed and they all passed successfully. So we've got a green tick, which we've got a green tick up here, which means let's go, install. So while that's becoming a domain control. Let's go see what else we've got running. We've got the web server. So what we'll do on this one is we might change the, or update the driver and tell it to shut down. So what we'll do is we'll go devices, insert the guest edition CD, and we'll run it. And that'll update the to the latest versions of the guest editions, and then we'll flick the driver off and then shut it down. We'll go to the next machine. So this machine's now ahead of DC2. Okay, I want to reboot manually. Finish. I want to go to not like that. I want to do a right mouse click and go to Device Manager. I want to go to Display Drivers and right mouse click Update. Browse, pick from the list and pick the Microsoft Basic Display. Next and go OK. Okay, so this thing's ready to reboot and then join the domain after that. So I'm going to shut this thing down for the moment. Work on the next computer. Shut down. Make it planned. Okay, so my domain controller is right. It's becoming a domain controller. It's going to sign me out and reboot, which is fine. So what I really should do is pop up my domain controller too, change its update its graphics or its extension pack, and then power it down and move on to probably the branch office domain controller one. So at the moment, I'm just doing this with only having 2 servers running, which is only using 3 GB. So I've always got plenty of space available for whatever I'm doing. So this one's all ready to go now. Once this becomes a domain controller, this one's nearly ready. We just got to change the to the latest version of the extension pack and flip the driver back. And then the only one we've got after that is the domain controller one out in the branch office. So we're getting there. And probably Windows 10 probably needs updating as well for the extension pack. Okay, so DC2 is up and running. If we have a look at the local server, it'll tell us that everything's all okay. So what we're going to do is devices, insert the guest editions, and we'll run it. Next, install. Okay, so put the new version of the graphics driver just in. Okay, we'll reboot manually after we've changed the driver back. We can kill that for the moment. Right mouse click and device manager. Let's go to the display adapters and right mouse click and update. Browse, list, switch it back to Microsoft Basic. Closed and done. So now I can power this machine off. Planned. Continue. So now I've got this thing's become a domain controller. It's just done a reboot. These two are ready to go. So that just leaves my branch office 1 domain controller. So let's power him up, get him all set up. Now, once we've got him set up, we still won't be able to do anything with this one until we actually create all of the VPN tunnels, which is another little thing by itself. We'll do that next week. I think, yeah, probably next week, I'd say. Waiting. Why wait? Let's move back to, oh, we've got to wait for that one too. Okay. We're over here. This is going to have a 192.168.10 dot. This will be a 10.2 with a gateway of 10.1. Still a /26. Yep. I didn't actually put the IP address on that one. Should have been .2 there. It's the same as this thing over here. That's the VirtualBox graphics. Yep, only got 2 servers running, 3 routers. That's good. So I still got I'm still doing okay as far as keeping the amount of RAM available. Accept usual password. Finish. Put the password in. Once you get to your third or fourth domain controller, it's like, oh, ho hum, it's all the same. Okay, we don't want to see that ever again. Let's go to guest editions updates available. Yes, I know. Local server. Enhanced configuration, turn that off. Remote desktop enabled. Assign an IP address. Properties. Turn off quality of service. Go to IP version 4. Give it a static IP address according to our network diagram over here. This is going to be 192.168.10.2. Mask with a .192 and a default gateway of 192.168.10.1. And the preferred DNS server is going to be in the long run, it's going to be itself. So I'm going to go. It's got to join the domain. So at the moment, let's put 192.168.0.2, which is our head office DC1. And the alternate DNS, I'll just put it out to the internet. Okay, so that's all okay. All okay, so we've got IP addresses. Let's found it. Let's hit the refresh button. IP addresses are there. Enabled, so let's change the name to B01 DC1. Did I? We do want to do a restart, but let's, while we're here, guest additions. Did I do the guest additions? Can't remember. Next. Well, we're doing it again anyway, whatever. Put some new graphics driver in. Reboot manually later. I'm ready to go, but let's change the graphics driver while we're here. Display adapter. Change that to update. Browse, pick it from a list, pick the Microsoft Basic, flicks it back. Okay, so now we're ready to restart. Restart now. So it should come back with the right graphics in place, IP address. We'll just test to make sure it can get out to the internet. I could have done that before I actually did the reboot, actually. No matter. Okay, so let's restart it. Okay. So while it's doing that, let's open up a command prompt. Right mouse click and send to the taskbar. Let's open it up and ping 8.8.8.8. And we're out to the internet. That's good. Exit. Okay, so this machine is now right. Let's just check the local server. Name's correct, that's off, got an IP address, everything's enabled, all good. So this machine will be down for a while now until we've got VPN tunnels up and running and all the rest of it. But it's all set up, ready to go to join the domain. Okay, so looking at our networks, we've got our DC1. So this will now be a domain controller. So we'll power up DC2 and web and get them to join the domain. Those two can join the domain. We'll be pretty right. And we'll do them one at a time. We don't have to do them at the same time. Or let's just try and have 3 servers and 3 routers going. So this is the sort of like the peak of how much stuff an 8 GB machine can run is 3 servers and 3 routers. Let's see if it works. Okay, so administrator, let's log in. Yeah, that looks pretty much like I've got the right driver in. Let's just have a quick check just to make sure. Yep, all good. Okay, back to local server. Comes up in the domain. Everything looks good. Okay. So let's go to Tools and Active Directory Users and Computers. And Tools, and let's go DNS. So expand out our DNS. Look at the forward lookup zone, look at the domain name, and we've got start of authority, name server, and HODC1 as the main device. All looks good. So what we're going to do is go back to HODC1, right mouse click and look at its properties, and look at the forwarders. And so it picks up the forwarder. See, the 1.254 doesn't have a fully qualified domain name to resolve because that's my NBN router. So it'll never resolve that. The 8.8.8.8 is Google's DNS server. So it's got the right forwarders in place. Now, what it did was it actually took those off the card because I had those on the network card. So it's taken those off the card and put those as forwarders. So when you promote anything to being a domain controller, if it's already got DNS settings on the card, it'll take those and turn those into forwarders on your DNS server if you create a new DNS server while you're making the domain, which is really, really handy. It never used to do that. You used to always had to put them in manually, but some of Microsoft's wizards have got a little bit better, which is good. Okay, so that all looks good. In the Active Directory users and computers, there are no computers as yet, but our domain controller is there. So that's good. So let's join the next couple of machines. So let's go to HODC2. Power that up. Come on. Actually, I might do stick that one up in the top. Stick that one just underneath it. Okay. Let's log into it. So what we're going to do is get this to join the domain. So what we're doing is we're getting this one to join the domain. The DNS settings point straight to that machine already. So joining the domain on the same switch, it'll be easy as. And I'll just do an IP config/all. And you can see there that the DNS server is pointed to 0.2, which is the DNS server there. So it should find it all okay. I probably should get rid of this other DNS server because I've got these DNS settings as forwarders in DC2 anyway. So sometimes if you've got multiple DNS servers in here, it won't join the domain. It just refuses. So it'll be, if it is, it's nearly always a DNS problem if the thing won't join the domain. Basic connectivity can't find it, or it's a DNS problem. They're the two major things that prevent any machine from joining a domain. and occasionally a firewall issue, whatever. Okay, so let's go to network and internet settings and Ethernet and change the adapter options and change the properties. That was the slow way of doing it, wasn't it? I'm going to take out that second card for the moment. So I'm just going to leave it pointing to here only. Can't be confused. Okay. So if I do that again, now it just shows 0.2 as being the DNS server. Okay, exit. So I want this to join the domain. So open up that, right mouse, click on PC and go to properties. And it's currently in a work group. I want to change that. So hit change, and I want it to join the domain GWMP BMW. Now I can just put the NetBIOS version of the domain name, so without the .local, and because it's in the same subnet, no problems, it'll find it. And administrator and usual password, and it'll all join the domain quite happily. Well, slowly. Yep, got there in the end. Just had to wait for it. Okay, so we're going to restart this machine now. It's joined the domain. So if I go back to my domain controller and look at computers, do a refresh, DC2 is there, which is what we wanted. And I killed the DNS, but if I have a look at the DNS as well from before, and look at the forward lookup zone and the domain, we can see HODC2 is now got an entry in the DNS as well. All good. Oh, I just logged in to the local machine instead of into the domain. Let me log out. That was dumb. Can I go power? Nope. Let's go sign out. Okay. Instead of logging into the local administrator, I want to log into the domain administrator. So GWMP. So if I just put in administrator here, it's always going to go to the local administrator. It picks up HODC. So you've got to put the domain credentials in the front. So GWMP BMW /, and then it's going to go to the domain administrator. Your password. So now we're logging into the domain. Okay, so if I look at the local server, you'll see that it's now in the domain. Okay, so we've got this machine to join the domain, and we can see the machines come up there, and it's also in under the computers here. So what we're going to do now is the web server. We'll do the same thing on the web server. Okay, so this is the point where those of you with 8 GB of RAM, it may or may not work. Considering 1.5 GB, another 1.5 GB, that's 3 GB. Plus I've also got another 0.5 GB there. So I'm up to 3.5 GB, and you're about to start up another 1.5 GB. Okay, so we're heading towards 5 GB, which means your host operating system's got to run in 3, which, you know, sometimes it won't. So this thing may not start. If it doesn't start, power off your DC2, start this up, get it to join the domain, and maybe we'll try and reduce the RAM even more. I don't know. But that's what's going to have to happen. We're going to have to go, you know, if 3 of them won't work, then we're going to have to go to turning these other two off while we put this one up, and, you know, all sorts of things like that. Okay, so let's go to our web server, power that up. Well, this is still a local machine at the moment, so that's fine. I'm going to join it into the domain. And you can see this is server 2016, this one. But remember, we still had the domain functional level and the forest functional level set at server 2016. So this should be able to join, no problems. Okay, so let's just check the network card and Ethernet. That's all very different. Let's look at IP version 4 and properties. Okay, let's get rid of that second alternate DNS. So that was good for us to get out to the internet and all that sort of stuff. But at the moment is all we need, so there's no confusion, is only the DNS server that's in the domain. So let's go OK on that, close, close, and close. Okay, so let's go start this, right mouse click on this PC, look at the properties, and let's change the setting from workgroup to domain. We want to go into a domain, and I'm going to go GWMP BMW. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that, and it's going to fail because I'm not in the same subnet as the domain controller, HODC1. Therefore, it needs the fully qualified domain name, the .local as well. So let's just prove this. Yeah, can't find it because I'm using the net BIOS, which only works within that subnet. It will not go past a router. It's a non-routable protocol. So it won't get to the next subnet. So I need to put in the .local. Sorry, .local, like that. Now it'll work. And so straight away, administrator, and the usual password. Did I just go cancel? I think I did.
Yeah, you did, because it would have said restart now.
Yeah, you idiot, Martin. I just automatically clicked that button there, administrator. You idiot, Martin. Okay, that one. welcome to the domain. So it was pretty fast this time, so it was good. Not like the other domain controller, I waited for ages. Weird. Okay, so yeah, the point to note is that if you're not in the same subnet as the domain controller, you must use the fully qualified domain name in order to join it. So we'll restart this machine now. And this machine will be in the domain. So let's go back to our domain controller 1. Let's do a refresh on here, and you can see that I've got both machines in the domain. And if I go to the DNS and do a refresh, nothing as yet, probably because it hasn't restarted yet. Although, let's join the domain. So in here, I need to go other user, and it's going to be GWMP BMW /administrator. And the usual password. Okay, so it looks like it's in. Let's have a quick look. Local server should come up as the domain name there. Yep, there's the domain name. So this thing's now joined the domain. Let's whiz back to our DC1, do a refresh on the DNS, and you can see that it's updated the DNS with its current IP address. So we've got that, and in our Active Directory, we've got that second machine now as a member of the domain. So, so that's good. So the one other thing that we can do here at the moment is on this computer here, we can actually set up the web server. I could promote this to being a domain controller as well. And so we've got about 13 minutes left. So I've got those two machines up and running, so why not give it a go? Okay. Okay, so we might be able to do both of those in that time. So let's go to domain controller 2, which is this one. In order to get that to join the domain, we need to add roles and features, of course. Skip this page by default. Next, next. It's DC2 on the server pool. We want to add directory services in here, add the features and go next, 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 and install. So that's putting the prerequisite for it becoming a domain controller. It'll do a reboot. While that's doing that, we're going to go to our web server and we're going to add in add roles and features, and we're going to add in the web server. So skip that page by default. Go next, 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 and down here is web server IIS. So we tick the box there. Add the features. Go next. And there's a bunch of stuff that other stuff. I think IIS hostable web core. Is there other stuff that we need? We don't actually care. A web server is a web server is a web server. Yeah, that'll do. We'll just do it like that and go next. Next. Okay, so in here we could do things for enabling FTP and all that other sort of stuff. there's the FTP stuff. Yeah, we don't probably need that FTP service. So we've got HTTP. And FTP, that'll do, I think. Okay, so let's go next on that and install it. So that's installing a web server and an FTP server onto our web server, which is a member of the domain of HOWWW. So let's go back to our DC2. Just a matter of waiting for it to do stuff. I got two installations happening at the same time here, which can be a bit problematic sometimes. It shouldn't be, because they're on separate machines, but ding, ding, ding. Is that emails coming in, is it? Yeah, looks like it. More emails. Just what I love. Emails. So today's lesson and the recording of this video is really the installation of servers and all the servers and promotion of that to a domain controller and joining the stuff that's in the head office to the domain and installing the web server, and hopefully we'll get this second domain controller created as well. And that'll be the end of this lesson. And then next lesson, what we'll do is we'll concentrate on, next practical lesson, we'll concentrate on creating the VPN tunnels to join the branch office to the head office, and then we'll join this server, which is all ready to go, to the domain. Okay, so we'll start that up and join it. You know, we'll drop this one off and power this one up and get it to join. And then the web server can stay off until at some point in the future where we want to check that we've got access to our web server. And we, probably when we get to the point of setting up firewall rules for the public coming in and getting to our web server is when we'll need it next. Okay. So we're not far off having this thing install all the prerequisite for becoming a domain controller. It'll require a promotion and then does a reboot. Okay, so it's the configuration, installation has succeeded. So now we're ready to turn this thing into a domain controller. So if we look at the notifications, it says promote this thing to being a domain controller. You can also look at it with down here, configuration required, and it's got more. And it's, there's promote this thing to being a domain controller. So it's part of the notifications, it comes up. Is there another place that it says that? I don't think so. I think that's the two places where it tells you. I normally just go straight to the notifications and go promote the thing to being a domain controller. That's what I do. Now I'm going to add this domain controller to an existing domain, the GWMP BMW.local. I can select it or it can find it for me. So this is not adding a new domain to an existing forest. I'm not making a brand new domain. What I'm doing is I'm adding a domain controller to an existing domain. So I'm going to select that. Oh, that is to select it, which it is. And let's go next. The credentials we're going to use is what I'm signed in with at the moment, which is the domain administrator anyway. Now, you've got the option of turning these things on or off. I'm actually going to leave both of those on You can also turn this thing into a read-only domain controller, which, if you're going to put a domain controller, say at the front counter in a library or something like that, not that I would ever do that, but if you did, then you could make it read-only. So, or let's just say I put it out in the branch office. So I could actually make this branch office one, domain controller one, a read-only domain controller. So nobody out there can make any changes. It's all done from the head office. So that would be a better place to actually put a read-only domain controller. So we're going to leave that there. The regular password. I think I got it right. Yep. Had a pause in the middle there. Specify the DNS delegation. The delegation for this DNS server cannot be created because the authoritative parent zone cannot be found. Show more. Okay, so if I'm integrating into an existing DNS infrastructure, you should manually create a delegation to this DNS server in the parent zone to ensure reliable name resolution from outside the domain. Otherwise, no action is required. Okay, so let's go. No action is required. Next. Next. We keep all that in the same positions. Next, next, next. This is the prerequisites check. And you can see here we've got the green tick, which means that it's successful and we can begin the installation. So now it's just a waiting game until it's finished promoting itself to being a domain controller, and then we'll have to look at making sure that the DNS servers are Active Directory integrated and can see each other and all that sort of stuff. I might just check back on the domain controller one. If I go to the DNS, stop, pause and restart. Properties. Interfaces, forwarders, root hints. I can't see. This is Active Directory integrated because it was created when you joined the domain. Yep. Startup authority, name servers, security zone transfer, wins, which we're not using. Dynamic updates are secure only. Okay. So I don't think there's anything that I can do here to change things. So when I reboot this machine, it'll come back in as HODC2. It'll come up as an additional name server in here. So let's have a look at where it's at the moment. So here it is, it's doing a reboot. We might just get this in before 3:30. Okay, so let's do a let's log in. Log in as the domain administrator. Okay, so we're now promoted this to being a domain controller, restarted it. So back on our first domain controller, I'm going to do a refresh in DNS. And it's not there yet, so that's okay. Okay, so let's go back to Active Directory users and computers. If I do a refresh on this, it'll disappear out of the computers and appear in the domain controllers. So it's disappeared out of the computers. If I look in the domain controllers and hit refresh, you can see that our DC2 domain controller is now in the domain controllers part of the Active Directory users and computers. So that's what we wanted. That's what we wanted to see. So at the moment, the DNS there's an Active Directory integration options. No, that's not it. I'm not quite sure where it is at the moment. Configure. Okay. Honestly, if you just wait 15 minutes, then the Active Directory integration will work anyway. So let's go to the tools in here. If I look at DNS on here, it will see itself as and you can see here it sees both DC1 and DC2 as name servers. Okay, so that's what we should see. If I have a look at the properties and look at the forwarders on this, you can see that it forwards out to the NBN router and also out to Google's DNS server. So it forwards out to those two things there. Okay, so this all looks okay. So let's go back to DC1, sorry, and forward lookup zones and do a refresh. So it hasn't popped up in here yet. It's definitely popped up on the second server. It will, these servers will synchronize because at the moment it doesn't see DC2 as anything other than just a straight host. It doesn't see it as a DNS server yet, but it will. So there is a way to try and force this. If you have a look at on the tools and go to Active Directory sites and services. And so if we expand out sites, expand out the default first site and the servers, you can see both servers are there. And what we need to do is, at the moment, there's no Active Directory replication happening between the servers, and we know that because the DNS settings aren't happening. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the subnets in this site link. So I'm going to do a right mouse click and go a new subnet, and I'm going to go 192.168.0.0 that subnet /26. Okay, it's a /26 subnet because that's what this is. That's a subnet in the default first site. Select a site that contains this new subset. I've got to select it. Sorry, select it. Okay, so that subnet is on the site link. So these two things. What we need to do is now force replication on these things. So if I right mouse click on that, all tasks, no, that's find and move and properties. That's for creating bridgehead servers. Type of global catalog, no, we don't need to change that. So on the NTDS, this is the settings. We could go new connection, all tasks, check the replication topology. So we might do that, check the replication topology. We'll need to refresh the sites container to see any new or aged connections. So we need to do a refresh. And it's found an automatic connection to DC2 by checking the replication topology. We're going to do the same thing on this one. All tasks, check the replication topology, and hit the refresh button. And so I've got an automatically generated link back to HODC1. So these two things are now linked via a site link to automatically update each other with any Active Directory changes. Now I can actually go replicate now. I can force a replication. So I can click on this one, click on the link itself and force a replication. The other thing that you can do is you can, on this thing here, you can replicate to and from the domain controller. Now that's really, really important because normally this is a push transaction, but this allows us to do a pull as well as a push. And so when we're trying to fix replication problems, specifically between sites, so between the head office site and the branch office site, you often have to use push and pull to try and get the replication started in the first place. So I'm going to go back to my DNS and see if it's picked up. I forced a replication between the two servers. I'm going to go back to here, and I'm going to do a refresh. Where's the refresh button? Can't see it. Let's kill it and go back into it then. Okay, let's do a forward lookup zone. Okay, and now you can see that we've got both name servers here on the domain controller one. We were having problems with when the DC2 information was not popping up into the DNS on the first server, and it just means that we had to force a replication between the DNS servers. Now that we've got that site linking happening, we've got that replication happening between the servers, it will just now continue forever. Okay, if it gets out of synchronization, then yeah, we'll get errors all over the place and warnings and stuff like that. So once you've got it running, it's generally very, very stable and works quite well. Okay, so that's where we're going to finish this particular lesson. I'm a little bit over time, so my apologies there. I'm going to stop sharing now. I'm just going to quickly summarize. So what we've done is we've installed head office domain controller 1, head office domain controller 2, head office web server, branch office 1, domain controller 1, and we've promoted our domain controller 1 to a domain controller. We've joined domain controller 2 and web server to the domain, and we've promoted the head office domain controller 2 to also being a DNS domain controller in the same domain. And we've forced replication between these two to make sure that Active Directory replication happens between the servers. And we've also installed the web server onto IIS, onto the web server here, and also FTP. So the head office here is pretty well set up. It just means now that the next session we'll need to set up VPN tunnels and routing between the subnets and get this domain controller to join the domain and then become a domain controller as well, and have its DNS also appear in the Active